Members, it's the appointed time, and we have a quorum. I call to order the meeting of the Public Works Subcommittee. In the 2024 session, as at the last meeting, we have approved 13 projects. The total allocation involved is $103.8467 billion. We have two papers on the agenda today. Both are new funding proposals. The two proposals involve a total allocation of $33.0563 billion. If all funding proposals are passed, the total number of projects approved would be 15. The total allocation would be $136.903 billion, excluding the block allocation for land acquisition and computerization, $27.09 billion. The total allocation for works projects will be $109.8933 billion. I remind members that in accordance with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure, please disclose the nature of any direct or indirect pecuniary interest involving today's agenda items. I also draw members' attention to Rule 84 in relation to voting in case of direct pecuniary interest. The first agenda item is PWSC 2024-25-6 of 828CL, remaining phase of site formation and engineering infrastructure works at Tung North New Development Area and Fanling North New Development Area construction. It proposes to upgrade 828CL, the remaining part of 828CL, to Category A. In money of the day prices, the estimated cost is $30.1679 billion. On 26th of March 2024, the administration consulted the panel on development on this proposal. Members were generally in support of the administration submitting this funding proposal to this subcommittee for consideration. The salient points of the deliberation of the panel was emailed to members on 3rd of June 2024. The list of public officers in attendance has been emailed to members before the meeting. I will not talk about, therefore, the public officers in attendance in detail. Members, please press the request to speak button if you wish to speak. I'll now read out the order in which members are going to speak. Ms. Chen Yuming, Dr. Chow Man Kong, Mr. Chen Siu Hong, Mr. Lam Chen Sing, Mr. Li Chen Kong, Mr. Sheng Hai Long, Dr. Lo Wai Kwok, Ms. Lam So Wai, Mr. Andrew Lam, Mr. Lau Kwok Fan, Mrs. Regina Ip, Mr. Chu Kwok Kong, Mr. Stanley and Mr. Yang Wing Kit. Ms. Chen Yuming, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I speak in support of the infrastructure works to be undertaken in the Northern Metropolis. This item was discussed in March at the panel. These areas are all located in the boundary zone. I would first like to declare an interest. I am a chairman of a rural committee. I first thank the administration for providing a supplementary paper to respond to my concerns on how the drainage system will deal with the extreme weather conditions. I want to ask, for phase 2 of Hong Shui Q recently has obtained funding from the council. With the works, it will improve the infrastructure in the rural area. So I want the administration to provide more details in relation to improvement works in rural areas of Tung North and Fanling North after the meeting. Also, most developments in the areas are residential developments. I believe the administration recently went to the North District Council for briefing. In fact, right now in Shengshui Station, during peak hours, many would have to wait outside the station to get home. The paper did not mention anything about connectivity to Fanling North. I'm very worried that when there is new population intake, there is going to be even more people congestion near Fanling and Shengshui stations. So I want to know more about the traffic and transport plans when the works are undergoing. Thank you. Permanent Secretary. Thank you for the questions, Ms. Chen. We are more than willing to provide a supplementary paper to respond to the first question. And we want to make sure the works that we undertake will help with those living in rural areas. We can definitely do more in terms of the improvement of the drainage system as well as the transportation network. We can provide such information in the form of a supplementary paper. I can also provide an answer to the second question for now, and I'll let my colleagues supplement my answers. In relation to transport connectivity, we will implement the works for Fanling Bypass Western Section with this proposal. We have already obtained some funding in the last proposal, and Fanling Bypass Western Section should be completed by 2025. With this section, people can get to Taipo without passing Fanling and Shengshui new towns. We will also have some transport interchanges set up. There will be new bus routes in future. It would be easier for people to get to Fanling Station. I'll see if my colleague has anything to add. Thank you. As the Permanent Secretary said, at the Taitao Lane roundabout, we will add a Poshek Road flyover. This should alleviate the traffic on Taitao Lane roundabout, and this should also facilitate people's commute. Thank you. Dr. Chow Man Kong. Thank you, Chair. I remember during the panel on development meeting, when we discussed this, the budget was much higher, and now it has a lower budget. I do appreciate that. Right now, there are 2 flood storage tanks in the areas. How will the added capacity deal with the extreme weather conditions? In fact, it costs a lot because it is said that for certain storage tanks it would cost 16,000 per cubic meter, and the others would cost 43,000 cubic meters. How much will you cost for this occasion? I also want to ask, so with the public housing projects to be completed in 2026, the population will get to 100,000, and as Chen Yutming asked, and the Permanent Secretary has answered, the Fanling Bypass Western Section will be completed by 2025. But then the other roads would only be completed in 2031, and the other station in Fanling will only be completed in 2027. How will you make sure the transport infrastructure can support the increase in population? In fact, the increase in population is exponential. With the works being completed that late, it may not be able to meet the short-term demand. I also want to ask about the households to be relocated. There are 1,006 25 households that are to be relocated, 313 business takings to be relocated. It is said that 170 parties have yet to decide, and all of them are to move out by Q3. What are you going to do with them? How are you going to help those affected and how will you encourage them to relocate to other locations? Thank you, Permanent Secretary. The member asked 3 questions. The first question is to be answered by Mr. Tung of the CEDD. I will answer the second and third questions. As the member said, in 2026, the public housing developments will be completed. We expect the major population intake will start in 2027. Tung Station will be completed in 2027. We believe that will be able to meet the short-term demand of those residents who just moved in. However, we will ensure there is connectivity. As I said earlier, part of Fanling Bypass will be completed in 2025. And as Mr. Chung answered earlier, Poshak Road flyover will help alleviate the traffic at Tai Tai Lane roundabout. And this proposal is exactly to fund that part of the works. We consider such works to be important. That is the Poshak Road flyover as well as the widening of Fanling Highway. Upon approval of funding, these works will be prioritized. The third question was in relation to relocation. We have been actively liaising with residents and we believe we have made good progress so far. As said earlier, 1,000 odd households will be affected and 313 business undertakings would be affected. We have got in touch with around 80% of those affected. The Lands Department will actively reach out to the rest in the near future. The first batch to be relocated would be in Q3, and it would be 700 odd households and 200 odd business undertakings that would be affected. We have got in touch with all of them. We have vetted their eligibility, and if they are eligible, they have already been relocated or have received some sort of financial support. I will now hand over to Mr. Chung of the CEDD to answer the remaining question of the member. Thank you. For the flood attenuation facilities, we have adopted the sponge city approach. That is a modern rainwater treatment approach. And as said in the paper, we have revitalized the water body and the meander in Fanling. In Tung North and Fanling North, we will also have 3 flood storage tanks. We will also have some sustainable drainage facilities put in place. For Fanling North, new development area in particular, for areas 12 and 6, we have a 27,000 cubic meters flood storage tank. In Tung North, in area 27, we have a 17,000 cubic meter flood storage tank, and it is approximately the size of 7 pools. For the Fanling North, the 2 storage tanks would cost approximately $500 million, and it would cost $9,200 per cubic meter. We have the latest standards from the DSD for flood storage tanks in this year. and the construction of the flood storage tanks will follow these standards. It should be able to meet the increased rainfall because the standards were formulated with reference to the rainfall intensity of last year. We believe we should be able to meet the needs in future. Thank you.
Next, Mr. Chen Siu-hong. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'd like to express my support for the remaining phase of site formation and engineering infrastructure works at Tung North New Development Area and Fanling North New Development Area. I must say that the paper has provided us with detailed breakdown of the project and also on the unit price for the site formation and engineering infrastructure works, so that we'll be able to easily understand and approve the project. So the total area is 320 hectares, a cost of 30.1 billion, and you can see that the remaining phase involves an area of 247 hectares. About 2 months ago, we approved the Hongshui-Kyu Ha village. We're talking about a similar scale of development. So this is really good reference for us to be able to compare the two projects. In paragraph 10, we see that the return tender prices have been reflected in this paper. So when it was first consulted at the panel on development in March this year, it was adjusted from 32.518 billion to 30.167 billion. I would like to ask where the downward adjustments were made, as this is very conducive to how we consider the papers. And then in Annex 3, there's also some other items with cost that we could use as reference. The interesting part is that in Hongshui-Kyu Ha-chun, there's also an enclosure, something of similar scale, which I could use as a reference. But in 2 short months, I see from the unit costs for other projects of a similar scale in nature and works value that there are some discrepancies in costs. Of course, the Hongshui-Kyu Ha-chun would be included. So overall development cost now has been adjusted to 9,900 to 17,400 per square meters. I don't understand why there is such a big discrepancy within 2 short months. So what is the main reason for that? P.S. Mr. Chen has asked 2 questions. The first one is in relation to the downward adjustment of about 2 billion. So there are 4 of the contracts related to site formation. We can provide you with a written response later on to show you the breakdown of where the adjustments were made. As to the second question, may I defer it to Mr. Chung, please? Mr. Chung. Thank you, Chairman. We make our estimates based on money of the day prices. Some of the estimates were made a few years back, and we want to consider inflation as a factor as well. Therefore, this time, we have decided to adjust the unit cost based on the price adjustment. Well, yes, I understand there is a need to make adjustments, but compared to Hongshui-Q, we're only talking about something that was approved 2 months ago. There shouldn't be such a huge difference within such a short period of time, or we don't have enough time. Can the administration provide us with a written response after the meeting? P.S. Well, I just want to supplement some information. The point made by Mr. Chung was what Mr. Chen reminded us for the Hongshui-Q project. That was what we did, and we decided to put in inflation as a factor. The cost of Hongshui-Q was not adjusted based on inflation. Therefore, there is such a difference in price. Thank you, Mr. Lam Chen Sing. Thank you, Chairman. Well, the PS said that, so we were able to make a downward adjustment of about 2 billion, and she would provide us with a detailed breakdown later on. Well, of course, we are happy to see that we're able to save cost, but then when the saved amount is too high, then it also gives rise to concern that we may not actually be paying the contractors, or the contractors may actually be asking for a very low bid price. Therefore, it is a bit worrying when the return price is very low. We want to ensure that the construction works are up to standard. I also want to better understand the transport infrastructure, because in Hongshui-Q there's actually a transport interchange. So is there also such an arrangement in Tung? If yes, then we should actually plan this at the time of site formation. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to know of have the green mass transit system. In paragraph 27 and 28 of the paper, we see that the estimated cost for the road at grade roads is around 84,200 per meters, and then it was only about 6,900 in Hongshui-Q before. These should be works of similar scale. Why is there such a price difference? In Tung North and Fanling North, the site formation part, the pedestrian highway, the unit cost is about 1 million per meter. The other is the widening of Fanling highway and the flyover for Poshek Road. The unit cost for that is over 1.3 million per meters. Well, we're talking about footbridges for both areas. So why is there such a difference in cost? P.S. Well, I'll hand over the third question to Mr. Chung and address the first and second question. Well, we will provide members with a paper on why there is such a high returned price for tender. Tung North actually is a large area. We're talking about a 40-odd hectares of site formation. So we do have to take into consideration the scale and nature of the works. We do have a mechanism for tender price. When the tender price returned is too low, we will reject the tender. So there is a mechanism to ensure that the tenders would not be overly low. But for where the adjustments have been made, we will provide members with a written response later on. Well, on Kutong North and Fanling North, on the transportation within the area, we did not plan in a green mass transit system because we are trying to make multiple uses of the land. And this area is smaller than Hongshui-Kyu. The Hongshui-Kyu development area is about 400 hectares. But for Kutong North, we only talk about 200, and Fanling North is close to 200 hectares. Looking at Kutong North, with a Kutong station, 80% of the population will be living close to the station. We do provide land transport, bike lanes, pedestrian walkways, and there is already, and these are already well planned out. And now I defer to Mr. Chung for the third question. Mr. Chung, thank you. The at-grade road cost in this project is 84,200 per meters. In Hongshui-Kyu, it's around 76,900 per meter. So we only talk about 9% difference, not even 10%. When we consider the width, the road situation, and also the length of the road, a difference of 9% actually is not too high. There's not too much of a difference. On the footbridge unit cost, the one near Fanling Highway will actually need to take the existing one down and then put up a footbridge again. So this is quite complicated as one also needs to go across East Rail. So there are 6 lanes for Fanling Highway, and for Castle Peak Road, it's around 2 lanes. So we do see a difficulty because after widening the highways and there will be more lanes, we would need a more complicated technical works for those footbridges. Thank you. Mr. Lee Chen-kung. Thank you, Chairman. This paper asks for approval of around 30 billion. We've already approved over 100 billion in allocation. The public sometimes asks what we are getting out of all these approved projects. What would the return be? I always say that Hong Kong needs further development. We need to come up with new policies, and this is actually the trend in developing in the northern part of the new territories. And we hope that with such development, there would be more opportunities provided and more industries would be able to establish in Hong Kong. Within the Kutong North New Development Area, we do see residential needs and also commercial needs. Many family offices will now be coming into Hong Kong, or other than buying government bonds, or we can look into private-public partnership as well. Many of the infrastructure works are actually for single-site, multiple uses. Can we actually adopt this approach and to try to better use new materials, perhaps to use new energy. You see now that for bus depot, they also use hydrogen buses. Can you also try to consider this in advance so that you could be able to provide such facilities in the future, whether it be Hongshui-Q or Kutong North? We've already drawn out general plans for that. Can we actually show exhibits such as new videos on Facebook or other social media platforms so that the public would also know what you are going to do in those areas, how you're going to develop those areas? Thank you.
Thank you. Permanent Secretary, the member asked 3 questions. The first one was whether we could allow more market forces to participate in the development of new development areas. The member is familiar with in situ land exchange arrangements, I presume. And we have had 2 in situ land exchanges in Fanling North, and we have already completed one. The other one is processing at this stage. The new development area is mainly residential. There isn't much area for industries. So I don't think there's much room for input of market forces such as what is happening in Hongshui-Q or Sentin Technopole. We will have such arrangements in the areas where there are more industry developments, and we will adopt the large-scale land disposal approach there. Regarding your second question, we did reserve land for bus depots. We will adopt the principle of single site multiple uses. We will make sure there will be space there to park goods vehicles. The member asked if our infrastructure can support the development of new energy. We will make sure the engineering infrastructure works at least won't impede the development of new energy in future, such as that for hydrogen energy or hydrogen fueled vehicles. We'll make sure the infrastructure would not pose any restrictions. As for how we can promote to the public the projects in these new development areas, the benefits that these projects will generate. We have at the moment websites on the specific projects, but there's of course room for improvement. We have earmarked land in Wan Chai North that will have like a gallery akin to City Gallery to showcase the development plans in different areas, such as the new development areas as well as the Khao Yi Chao artificial islands, so that there will be more public awareness. Thank you. Mr. Shen Hailong. Thank you, Chair. I'm not a member of the panel on development, but I did hear about this project and I did discuss with public officials this item for over an hour before during a non-official meeting. I'm quite familiar with the details of the project as a result. I think the unit cost compared to other projects is reasonable, so I would support the relevant project. I have some questions. The relevant proposal would make use of NEC. Is it the case that with the approach adopted, no additional funding will be required? I also want to ask that it is said that 50,000 jobs will be created through this proposal, but then it has included the number of civil servants needed for relocation. So I want to ask how many new jobs are created specifically. We have 100 to 200,000 talents that have recently arrived in Hong Kong. Many of them, I believe, are civil engineers, structural engineers, or at least those who are in the engineering sector. If they do not have internship experience, despite the fact that they have graduated from top-notch academic institutions, they will not be accepted. So will you consider recruiting such talents? I would like to first declare that I am a chairman of an association for incoming talents. I believe there are at least 500 jobs that will be made for engineers. Would you consider for these 500 jobs recruiting the talents who are new arrivals in Hong Kong? Thank you. Permanent Secretary, we believe with the approach taken for NEC and specifically the engineering and construction contract option C approach, we will minimize the possibility of us asking for additional funding. And with the sharing of the cost and savings with the contractor, there is a cap imposed. I'll perhaps let Mr. Chung talk about that in detail in due course. I'll answer the two other questions of the member first. Regarding the jobs to be created, it would be 53,000. With the offices moved in, we believe 6,000 jobs can be created. We welcome those who have been admitted to Hong Kong under various talent admission schemes, such as the Top Talent Pass scheme, who have come to Hong Kong to work with us. Whether they're working directly for us or working for contractors, we're more than welcome to have their participation in the projects. Thank you. Mr. Chung. Thank you. We will adopt, as said by the Permanent Secretary, the engineering and construction contract option C approach of the NEC new engineering contract, and the relevant contractor would have to submit the invoices and accounts for the government to review. The contract terms also include a mechanism to share any savings or overruns on the target price. If the actual expenditure is lower than the target price, the government will in general share with the contractor the savings according to the mechanism stipulated in the contract. In general, it would be 5%. If the actual expenditure exceeds the target price, we will share the excess expenditure, but it is subject to a cap. The government will bear at most an additional 5% of the target price. This mechanism would encourage the contractor to save costs, and we as the owner and designer will also strive to work with the contractor to adopt an approach that would save costs as much as possible. So both the employer, we, and the contractor will work together to save costs. Chair, excuse me, I have a follow-up question. In relation to the civil servants responsible for relocation, I think in a recent project for Wan Chai North, there were civil servants who were deployed to different areas. So they are only internally deployed from other areas. They are not necessarily new jobs created. Isn't that the case, Permanent Secretary? Well, I think we can take this perspective. With government offices moving into new development areas, government premises in urban areas can be converted to other uses, such as in Wenchai North, before there were multiple government buildings. After relocation, we will construct CNE facilities and offices and hotels. Once these buildings are completed, new job opportunities will be created because the civil servants would be deployed elsewhere. Thank you. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you. For Kutong North and Fanling North new development areas, the first phase commenced in 2019. We're now talking about the remaining phases works. There's really no reason why I shouldn't support this. And for the $30-odd billion in cost, I think it is reasonable. And it was approved in the in the panel on development. I believe it should pass in the Public Works Subcommittee as well. However, I emphasize that you should take into account the needs of existing operators in these areas, such as those in agriculture or logistics. In July 2023, I have worked with the engineering and construction sector as well as the Construction Industry Council to help the operators affected. We have arranged meetings with the Development Bureau for the operators to talk about their needs. The Lands Department only issued letters without proper communication. That has caused great problems. Some officials would say that it would only be temporary pain for the operators, but I would say this: the operators suffer significant losses. It said in paragraph 7. We are talking about active farmland to be affected 15 hectares. One livestock farm will be affected. The number of households to be cleared 1,065. Number of business undertakings to be cleared 313. I think it is not appropriate that you are saying you're clearing away these people here. We should just say that they are affected. You shouldn't just dismiss their needs that easily. They generate great benefits for the economy of Hong Kong. They contribute greatly to the economy. For those in the agriculture and livestock industries, they should be respected and we should help with their livelihood. I'm not sure what businesses they practice exactly. Can you provide a written response on this? And for those affected, will you provide land for them to carry on with their business? These operators are very important because a lot of them are actually working in infrastructure and they are being removed when you are trying to undertake infrastructure works. It is so ironic. In fact, Mr. Frankie Yik spoke many times on behalf of the logistics sector, and I myself have spoken much for my sector. So don't say that I'm repeating what I said earlier. We have to emphasize that the needs of the operators have to be taken into account. Thank you.
何尚比，可以簡單回應嘛？
P.S. Please give a brief response. We will try to adjust our wording in future for brownfield operators, referring to Tung North and Fanling North. In paragraph 35 of our paper, we mentioned that out of approximately 313 business operators to be affected, 258 involve brownfield operations, including warehouses, construction industry, recycling industry, vehicle repair, workshops, car parks, etc., covering a total area of about 40 hectares. The Lands Department has contacted the majority of the brownfield operations to handle the ex gratia repayment and allowance. The Development Bureau has a team responsible for these operations. For those of them who would like to relocate, and we would assist them in relocating their operations. Well, on the premise of not affecting our construction, we allow brownfield operators to continue their operations as long as possible while they are looking for relocation sites. When our after site formation, and we do not yet need to use the site, and the site is close to main roads, we would consider it at a temporary basis allow the brownfield operators to continue their operations. We do try to come up with ways to work it out with the operators and try to smooth out the clearance. Chairman, talked about the participants that attended meetings in the past few years, and actually the wording you use reflect your policy and your attitude. I once again reiterate that if you really say that you are clearing, if you were operators, you wouldn't want to be cleared out. Thank you. Ms. Lam So Wai. Thank you. I speak in support of this item. We need about 30 billion to develop these two areas in Tung North and Fanling North, which is a very high amount. I see that 23 sites for private housing has their GFA increased by 20%, and also to use land for commercial undertakings. So how much is the return from these commercial undertakings? And then for livestock farms, there would be a multi-story building for the livestock farms. How are you going to minimize the odor? Because the Longwood Correctional institution is close by, it may affect the environment. Would the odor affect those living in the area? Well, I'm not sure how modern the MSB livestock farm would be. So that is my concern. And thirdly, in terms of cost, it would take about 200 billion to clear out the construction. So could you actually reduce that? And then we would need 84,600 per meter for the road. Why is the cost so high? Can we actually reduce the construction cost for these at grade roads? Yes. Thank you. I'll defer the third question to Mr. Chung. As for the first two questions, so how much return would the commercial or GFA bring in? We're talking about 500,000 square meters for commercial use, for retail, restaurants, to support local residents. So we are not using those for developing industries. So these would actually be to support local residents. For the second question on the multi-story building for livestock farms, we are mainly responsible for the site formation, after which the land would be handed over to the AFCD. I understand that they are looking into the funding of the MSB. The AFCD believe that a multi-story building for livestock farms would actually be more efficient in minimizing odor, because they have actually visited some of these multi-story farms on the mainland and other places and found that odor could actually be handled within a building. For the other questions, may I defer to Mr. Chung? For the road works, we're talking about 84,600 per meter. Well, at grade road works include even the sewerage systems and the pipes underground, which would all be included within the cost. The cost seems high, but we are talking about many complicated procedures and works underground as well, not just the service of the road. So this is actually the cost necessary and similar to the projects of similar scale. We're going to try our best to minimize cost. As I said earlier, we would adopt the NEC model to encourage contractors to use that as well, and we are going to closely monitor the cost at every stage of development. On inert waste or non-inert waste, we're talking about probably trees and yard waste. We would request the contractors to reuse more than 10% of the yard waste, and they may use it for signage at the construction site. And they actually can use some of the wood shavings for future planting. I would like to say that even though we request about 10% from the contractors, they have actually reached 30% of reuse. Some other government works can also reduce 10% of our waste, so only 50% remains back to White Park. Well, based on the calculation, there will still be 10% left. Well, that 10%, unfortunately, will need to go to landfill because there may be mold or bacteria. And so we have already tried our best to reduce the waste sent to landfill. Thank you. Mr. Andrew Lam, thank you. 30 billion is a very high price, but it also gives us confidence in that we are actually building for the future. I just want to say that we're actually going through many different tensions at the moment. We hope for a brighter tomorrow, but we also need to consider the present to look at strategic or geopolitical tensions. Well, this is just a comment. Now to my questions. On noise barriers, we're talking about 3.7 billion at the moment. Let's use T4 as an example. T4 uses traditional materials which are up to standard, which could actually help us reduce 14% of the cost. So may I ask what kind of materials we're using for this project? I actually do not mind which one we are using. I just want to know what the planning standards are for such a large-scale project. Because if we're talking about savings of 14%, we're talking about 500 million already, which is not a small figure. In Ma Chou Long, some of the land would be used for technological development. In Kutong North, it seems that it's still under consultation on how it would be developed. Would the ultimate decision be different from what you're considering at the moment? And thirdly, so on the site you can actually build about a 360,000 square meter site. So that would cost about 20 billion. I hope that you can draw reference from Yuen Long and Hong Shou Kiu to really look into all the details to see whether there is room for improvement or room for savings. P.S. Thank you, Mr. Lam, for your reminder. We would continue to monitor the situation. The Yuen Long Inno Park multi-story building returned tender price should be back end of June, and we are looking forward to seeing that. I can ask Mr. Tung to explain about the noise barriers. You asked about the sites near Ma Chou Long in Kutong North, or some of those that were allocated for science and technology, yet now its focus in Santin Technopole. So for those original earmark sites, we could now consider it for different uses. But no matter how we're going to use it, we still first need to go for site formation. So the planning and construction team would work together to ensure that the infrastructure would be in place, because the CEDD would of course leave a buffer when they work on the site formation. But I'm sure that we'll be able to further develop once the site formation is done. Thank you.
當然
Mr. Zhang, thank you. On the materials for noise barriers, we have made use of the most traditional kind. We have adopted the principle of fitness for purpose and no frills, but such materials are reinforced. They are lighter, but then they are stronger. With them being lighter, we will need less for the piles, and we do not need to undergo piling. We will only need a lighter foundation. We believe through such we can save some costs. Thank you. Mr. Lau Kwok Fan. Thank you. I would like to first declare that I am a chairman of a committee related to the project. I would first express my support for the project. Since 2008, we have been promoting development in New Territories East. It has been many years since then. This project would cost $30 billion. I want to ask, could you have obtained the funding sooner? I am asking this because for Fanling North and Tung North, they are different from other areas in the New Territories in the sense that we had a mechanism in place that would ask for expressions of interest early on. And in phase 1, I believe, or before that, some have already applied for relocation, such as those in Po Shek Wu Estate. The estate is essentially left idle, awaiting development. So is it the case that you do not have to wait for the proposal to get to such a large scale before you obtain funding? On the relocation for Po Shek Wu residents, since 2008, when it commenced, and the arrangements were enhanced in 2018, the rehousing and compensation arrangements have been revamped significantly. And I would say that it is an enhancement. We recently had a working group meeting for the areas. So I want to ask for on-sale estate. When will they be rehoused, and what is the amount of compensation that will be provided to residents? I want to see if the administration has a concrete reply today. I also want to ask about in-situ land exchange. There are several lots that were supposed to undergo in-situ land exchange that did not go through, and the government would take back such land. Would you be conducting site formation works for such land on this occasion? Because if you are to sell such lots, you would have to conduct site formation first. So would you consider conducting site formation works for those areas in this project? Thank you. Permanent Secretary, thank you. We do note the members' comments in relation to seeking funding early on and in smaller batches. There are different considerations at play, I would say. We do appreciate the feedback given by the member, but then if we seek funding in smaller batches, it may not be the case that we can present a full picture for members' reference. the member also asked about Park Wall Road. As you may know, for the development in Park Wall Road, some flats were rented, some flats were purchased. In this year, we will publish the details in relation to the prices, and we hope to have population intake this year. Regarding land acquisition in situ, for the land that did not have successful in situ land exchange, would you do site formation works for them? Right. We will provide site formation works for the lots that do not have successful in situ land exchange for this project. Thank you. Mrs. Regina Ip. This project has a long history. The study commenced before the handover, and it was mentioned in the policy address slightly before 2008, and in 2008 consultations commenced. As you may remember, the project was very controversial. On the day that we are to fit the project for the Finance Committee, there were riots taking place right outside the Letco complex, and we had to suspend the meeting. And Mr. Andrew Lam asked about why we didn't have this project undertaken sooner. I would say this, he probably forgot how much opposition we had before. So I do appreciate now we have this project to be considered. We have gone a long way since 2007. But I want to ask, are the plans still the same as what we had before? If they are, will they be updated? Before, we would provide much for retail. As said in paragraph 13, we have for retail and multiple facilities, this space would amount to approximately 400,000 square meters. And we were to have such facilities for visitors from the mainland. But we now understand that there is a different context from what we had before. Instead of people coming to Hong Kong, many of those in Hong Kong are actually going to the mainland. Will you make adjustments taking into account the demand for such, or projected future demand for such facilities? Thank you. Permanent Secretary, excuse me, I can't really hear you. Most of the developments in the areas are residential in nature. In the two new development areas, there are over 80,000 units, housing units, to be provided in the two new development areas. These will constitute a big part of the housing supply in future. So when we are constructing facilities, we do not really have visitors in mind. We will construct mostly retail and F&B facilities to support the needs of residents in the area. Well, I remain concerned because the population intake will be 2029 to 2031. You said the Kutong North Station on the Northern Link will be completed in 2027. So the population intake will be 7 to 8 years from now. But then we have already received reports that the markets in Sha Tin are already having suffered great losses due to the lack in demand, and Sam's Club is about to set up shop in Hong Kong. I think we may not have much demand for such facilities. I think, as Mrs. Regina Ip said, would you consider adopting a flexible approach with the provision of facilities in the areas? Thank you. Mr. Chu Kwok-keum. The Permanent Secretary talked about in great detail their plans for the development of Tung North and Fanling North new development areas. Many will have to be relocated. I think the arrangements right now are less than ideal. Even if you provide for relocation arrangements to multi-story buildings, there will be much competition. So I want the administration to explain in detail the rehousing arrangements for those affected. And also, if you conduct in situ land exchange, if you have to take back the land in a short period of time, it will affect operators greatly. So please be prudent in this regard. I also want to ask about land in Tung. Some land uses will be changed. Some are undetermined at the moment. Some would say this: having more housing units would of course be ideal, but we are also looking to promote culture, sports, and tourism. We need to seek coordinated development of both urban areas and the new territories. Should we have more cultural facilities such as museums in the northern metropolis? I want to ask if the administration has any preliminary plans in relation to this, and would you consider incorporating more cultural and tourism elements in northern metropolis? Thank you. Permanent Secretary, the member asked 2 questions. The first one was on the brownfield operations that are affected. We have to be honest. We have a pretty tight short-term housing supply or land supply in the next few years. We do seek to provide support to brownfield operators affected to relocate to other areas in the new territories. And this would be a temporary relocation, unfortunately. So the Development Bureau will try our best to provide some advice to operators to see if such land can be used for the uses that they need. And they will also need to apply for exemptions for certain planning uses, and we will also facilitate that. We will try to let the operators stay in the relocated land as soon as possible, and we will also provide support to them should they need to be relocated again. We will provide temporary relief. And we are trying to create land in other new development areas that would have land for the development of industries and multi-story buildings for industries, such as what is happening in Yunlong. There is a lot currently available for auction. We should be able to provide more choices to brownfield operators in future. We do understand that some brownfield operations cannot take place in buildings, so we will also reserve open air space for brownfield operators in other areas for their long-term uses. So that is our answer for brownfield operations. The member also talked about the land uses in the 2 new development areas, and the members' observations are quite correct. We will try to see if we can put some large-scale cultural and recreational facilities in the new development areas. The member may remember when we talked about the development of Central Technopole, it is actually quite close to Tung North. It should just be 1 train station away. there are several hectares of land in Central Technopole that would be reserved for sports facilities and cultural and recreational facilities. So we will make sure large pieces of land will be earmarked for cultural and recreational facilities. For the two new development areas, Kutong North and Fanling North, the positioning would be residential. So it's not that we have large lots in the areas. So we do not plan on putting large-scale cultural and recreational facilities in the area at the moment. And seeing that we already have such facilities in Central Technopole, that should be adequate.
Chairman, we can actually draw reference from what is done on the mainland. They actually consider all the in situ exchange or relocation before planning. This is much more ideal. Thank you. Mr. Stanley Ng. Thank you, Chairman. I am in support of new development. I am also concerned about 3 areas. One, on workers' rights. Recently, as you all know, the Anderson contractor was unable to pay workers, and the FTU is quite concerned about that. The government should really monitor strictly the contractors. Other than main contractors be responsible for subcontractors, we really don't want to see this kind of conflict occur again and again. So how would the government enhance its monitoring on that? The northern Metropolis is developing at full steam. We hope that it can actually connect to mainland development and play a more important role in the Greater Bay Area. I visited a few mainland cities in the past few days and see that they are developing really rapidly. Our projects, however, take years. Are we really able to catch up? I hope that the government will feel the urge and not just think that all projects should go step by step and there will not be an urge to complete it as soon as possible. Lastly, this site is mainly for residential use. Can I have a clear idea of the PPP percentage, especially for public and private housing? Why does it seem that the ratio does not reflect what the government has been saying all along? Thank you. P.S. Thank you. 3 questions. The first question, I understand that member is concerned with workers' rights. We will not approve unreasonably low returned tender prices, as this may give rise to more issues during the construction stage. We will not consider overly low tender prices. the Development Bureau has already set out clearly that there would be more structured arrangement for workers, and we hope that it could help us handle some of the problems. We are also very concerned with the progress. As stated in the paper, for the remaining phase, we're talking about an area of about 200 odd hectares in site formation. So compared to the 70 hectares at the first phase, we're talking about a huge increase. So this time, we're talking about 7 years. We are still going to complete it within 7 years, even though that the area has increased to about 200 hectares. We're going to ensure that we will complete it as soon as possible. On the ratio of public and private housing, in paragraph 5 in the paper, we can see that for the two sites will provide a total of about 86,200 housing units, of which about 57,500 are public housing. So it's 67 to 33 for public to private housing. So this actually is in line with our policy of about 70% to 30% ratio. Mr. Ng seems to be concerned with renting, leasing, and so 70% of them would be for rental housing, 30% for purchase. Thank you. Mr. Young Winkit. We're talking about a project of about 30.1 billion here. So that's around 32,300 per square meters. So that means we're talking about 116,300 square meters. So we're talking about 40 kilometers. So if we go by height of 4 meters, and we will be able to handle 40 kilometers. If you go by width and length of 2 kilometers, then the area would be around 15 kilometers. And together with the let's say the flyover, that 850 meters in length, and the widening of Fanling highway, we're talking only about 19 kilometers in total. So actually that does not match the figure. So would there be noise barriers for the entire highway? I don't know how you come up with this number, because if I take your calculation, let's say that noise barrier should be about 3 meters high, they usually wouldn't be 4 meters high. That's the first question. For the second question on retail, in paragraph 5, we're talking about area of about 150,000. Well, if you look at the vacancy in recent years, it's about 7.1% and 8.3% in Shui and Fanling at the moment, because many people now go for consumption up north, and therefore there are many vacant retail stores in the area. In the future, would there be a flexibility in the land use? Can actually the shops change to different uses instead of only for retail use? Can it actually be changed to community facilities? With a flexibility, then you'll be able to meet future needs. You know that there would be the railway, the Northern Rail, and there would be station. Well, you don't know what's going to happen 10 years from now, but there may be many mainland visitors coming to Hong Kong. There's no guarantee. Nobody knows what's going to happen. But should we actually provide a flexibility during the planning stage? P.S. I will ask Mr. Tung to respond to the question on noise barrier. Let me first talk about the area for retail space. It's actually dotted in different sites. We're not talking about one huge site. There is no one site planned for commercial use. Instead, all these would be separated on different sites for different uses. We hope there would be retail space in all sites, such as restaurants and shops, to cater to the needs of the residents. Recently, there have been a larger number of people surging north to spend, but residents would need supermarkets and restaurants in the vicinity. Therefore, we hope that these could take care of the residents' needs. Mr. Chung. Well, one part of the North Barrier would be at Bo Sek Wu Road flyover on top of the interchange. Next to Po Sek Wu Road, many high-story residential buildings, and so we would need to install a barrier. The other part will be for the widening of Fanling Highway. I've been to Fanling Highway area. It's very noisy because traffic is very busy there. So we would make use of this opportunity when we are widening the highway to minimize noise. The noise barrier would be set at a 7-meter height, with a sort of inclination at 3 meters. So after the widening of the highway, there would be 8 lanes. So barriers would also be installed in the middle. There wouldn't only be barriers towards the side. You're not able to actually see the complexity of it on paper. The unit cost for noise barrier is actually similar to other projects of similar scale, and we would also try to have reinforced steel to try to reduce the cost. Well, if a member is interested in the measurements of the noise barrier, then you can approach Mr. Chung later on. Mr. Benson, look. Thank you. Chairman, I speak in support of the item. It seems that the estimated figure from 30.1 billion to the 32.5 billion, there's been a downward adjustment by 2.35 billion. So I see in paragraph 10 that there's an explanation that in January of this year, the CEDD has invited tenders for the remaining phase works. And up till now, there's already been a savings of 7.2%. The administration is going to provide us with a response in the breakdown of the savings. And I believe that the public will all acknowledge that the government is working hard to reduce cost. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok has mentioned earlier that in our site formation, there are many people affected. Many business undertakings have been affected. Those may be in heavy machinery or backup operators. I see that also some farmers have been affected. We can't just say that we have to clear them out. We must try to relocate them. In paragraph 14, I see that innovation and technology will concentrate in Sentin Technopole, and there would be a review for the study for the Mato Long area. Some sites are actually close to the bypass. I hope that the government can relocate those operators who are in need to relocate to such areas. Well, now that you are working on a review, do you already have some preliminary findings? As Mrs. Ip said, we could not only put in retail because that would be going backwards. It could not really meet future uses. Can you share with us what is being under review in the study, and would there actually be a decision made by the end of the year?
上批
Permanent Secretary. As the member said, regarding paragraph 14, the study for the Mato Long area, we plan to publish the findings in this year. As for some preliminary plans, as I said earlier, most developments in the two new development areas will be residential in nature. So not much land will be used for the development of industries. We will try to concentrate developments of industries in Sentin Technopole. So right now, we have to consider the fact that the developments here would be housing, and we are planning to provide 80,000 odd housing units. 70% of them would be public, so we want to have other developments, perhaps private residential developments. We will also consider relocating more offices in urban areas can be relocated to these two new development areas, thereby releasing precious land in urban areas. In the long term, as the member said, we can perhaps consider that for some land that have yet to be used for their long-term uses, perhaps we can use such land to provide to operators for their operations in the interim period to provide more support to brownfield operators. Thank you. Ms. Nixie Lan. Thank you, Chair. I have listened to other members speak and the administration's responses. I want to ask about the overall planning. It is said that 80,000 housing units will be provided and 53,000 odd jobs will be created. Most of the developments are supposed to be residential in nature. Does the administration have plans what the departments are that are going to be relocated in the new development areas? I also want to ask how many in the 53,000 jobs will be those for civil servants. I want to ask if you are only providing limited facilities such as retail and F&B facilities. I imagine most of the residents would have to work outside the new development areas. Would that cause some problems? Because the job opportunities to be provided may be limited by the limited scope of facilities to be provided in the new development areas. But I am worried because the transportation network will not be fleshed out until a few years later. It may cause problems to residents in the areas. How can you make sure there is a smooth transition? I have been listening for a coordinated development for residential and transportation developments, and I do not think I've heard anything to such extent. So I wonder if this would impact people's demand for residential units in the area. What do you think? Permanent Secretary. Thank you. The government departments that we plan to relocate to the area would include Queensway government offices departments such as the FEHD and the ArchSD. We are planning to move some of the departments in the Queensway government offices to the government buildings in the two development areas. These are just some examples. As for those who have to go to somewhere outside the new development areas for commute, our plan is indeed that most of the developments in the two new development areas will be residential in nature. That's why not many job opportunities will be created. That is only 53,000 of them. But then I think we should take a more macro perspective. As I said earlier, Shenton Technopole is only one train station away, and hundreds of thousands of job opportunities will be created them, and many of them will be related to INT. If we look to the west in Hongshui-Q, there are also over 100,000 job opportunities that will be provided of different sectors. There will be job opportunities related to professional services, white-collar industries, as well as logistics. I do understand where the member is coming from, but if we take a more macro perspective, if we consider other new development areas that have more land for industries, they actually provide quite a number of job opportunities. I believe with that perspective, people will only need a short commute to work. Thank you. I only have a follow-up. I want to make sure there is proper planning of the transportation available. Thank you. Mr. Tan Ka-Pew. Thank you. Ms. Nixie Lam's questions are very much valid. We, of course, want to facilitate people's commute. I actually am very familiar with Tung New Town Extension. And we would say only 20% of the residents would be working in the area, in the vicinity of the airport still, even with significant encouragement from the government. So there may be multiple options available: INT, various industries, logistics, and the universities in the university town. But then it may not be the case that a large number of opportunities will be available. In fact, the job opportunities may be of a relatively high quality, and they may not cater to the job needs for the lower income earners. And they would still need to take a long commute to work in urban areas. Significant funding is used in the project for transportation works. That is $8 billion. I think, of course, transportation projects should be undertaken because the traffic congestion in the area is bad at the moment. If there is an accident on Tai Tao Lane roundabout, basically traffic will be paralyzed in the North District. So why not undertake the traffic improvement works earlier? If you are conducting the works now, is it the case that it will create synergy? Apart from transportation, are there other plans that you are planning to undertake in due course? Thank you, Permanent Secretary. I'll let Mr. Chung supplement my answers. As you may know, for Poshak Road flyover and the part for Tai Tao Lane roundabout, the works were in the pipeline for quite some time, and we are obtaining funding for these works on this occasion. We do understand the members' concern. That's why for the $30 billion that we are going to spend on this project, these works will most definitely be prioritized. As for the works that have yet to be included in the proposal that would be beneficial to the residents in the area, I believe there is none of that. I think we have covered all bases at the moment, but I'll let Mr. Chung correct me if I'm wrong. Thank you, Mr. Chung. Tony Chung. Thank you. I think we can take a macro perspective. Works at Fanling Highway, the Poshak Road flyover, as well as the Tai Tao Lane roundabout. We will first widen the Fanling Highway, and some roads would connect to the Poshak Road flyover. I think it is more prudent to take a macro approach when conducting road improvement works. I do understand where the member is coming from, so I would say this: we will definitely prioritize the works for Poshak Road flyover. We also have some contract terms to ensure the contractor complete the works as soon as possible. Members, we are only less than 20 minutes away from the end time of the meeting, and we have 6 members who have indicated their wish to speak for the first round or the second round. If other members wish to speak on this item, please press the request to speak button now. We want to complete the discussion of this item today, so I will extend the meeting by not more than 15 minutes if necessary. It would depend on members' speeches, how long they will take, so please observe the time limit if possible. Thank you. Mr. Luk Chung Hong, thank you. I want to ask about cost control, about paragraph 28, or the individual key items under paragraph 27. In fact, for the road widening, it would cost $570,000. Vehicular bridges would $760,000 per meter, and footbridges would be $1.4 million per meter. Why are bridges more expensive than vehicular bridges. The footbridges may be covered, but I do not see why it justifies a significant increase in the costs compared to those for vehicular bridges. Can you adopt MRC method to save costs? That's my first question. My second question relates to noise barriers. I think other members asked about this. Would we be able to use the new materials that will be used for the T4 project to save costs? I'm not saying that we should use lesser materials. I think there are two factors at play here. With new energy vehicles, most of the vehicles will be quieter than they are now. I also want to ask if you will use some quieter road surfacing materials in the mainland. These materials will be more quiet and they are essentially of better quality while costing less. In fact, if you have traveled on the HZMB, you would notice that once you get to a certain section, the noise gets significantly less than before. So will you consider adopting the relevant materials? I also communicated with the Highways Department before with the materials used for paving the roads. Can we make use of the ones with less friction so that people can save fuel and we can save costs at the moment? Often the materials would come from overseas. Can we make use of materials from the mainland that would help us save costs?
And for the western section of the Fanling bypass, well, it seems that we don't have too much information on paper, but from the diagram, it seems that it's a double lane, dual direction section, but it looks to be very narrow when you're comparing that with other roads. Mr. Chung. Thank you, Chairman. Well, so for similar projects, we're looking at to 1.16 million to 1.28 million per meter. So that's of similar price. Currently, we're talking about 1.388 million, almost 1.4 million per meter. Well, it does look a bit higher, but actually not too much. The reason for that is that for Fanling Highway, we'll need to take down a bridge, and undergoing construction on the highway itself is much more complicated. Therefore, the cost will be much higher. But why is it much higher than vehicular bridges? It's because there will need to be stairs and elevators leading up to the footbridges. Therefore, if you just look at it by length, you may think that it's more expensive per square meter or per meter, but actually it's a similar unit cost to other footbridges as well. How about the noise barrier? We are going to use traditional materials for the noise barrier to try to minimize the cost as much as possible. How about for road surfacing materials? We would use noise reduction materials. And for the western section, So actually, there are 2 lanes, one in both directions. In 2014, the highest ratio was only till 0.71, meeting the demands till 2041 for the VC ratio. So that's adequate to meet the needs. Thank you, Mr. Tang Fei. Thank you, Chairman. Government paper shows that for these 2 new developments, we're going to accommodate about 220,000 people with about 86,200 housing units. Well, other than reserving space for GIC facilities, would you also leave areas for school uses? There would be a large population moving in. Let's say in 10 years from now, if people are still going up north for spending, then you may not need so many retail shops. And that's the same goes for schools, because we don't know out of the 227,000 population moving there, how many of them would be children. And children may go to schools in the vicinity, such as Yuen Long and Fanling. Well, although schools are a bit full in the Northern District, can still go to Yuen Long. So, is there area reserved for schools at the moment, and would there actually be a flexibility? Because if there would be school facilities, and would also need to invite schools to come in, because some schools may not be willing to submit application to open up a school here. So could you actually be a flexibility for land use? Thank you. P.S. Thank you for your question. We would meet with the responsible policy department, and for schools, we of course would then talk to EDB. Based on the current situation in the district and in our estimates for school-age children, considering a basket of factors, we do have plans to accommodate schools and have reserved such land. As schools would have a flexibility because they would all go under GIC facilities. Or taking into consideration the change in situation, even if schools are not needed, it can also be used for other GIC facilities. Thank you. Mr. Louis Long. Thank you, Chairman. This is the item for remaining phase for Kotong North and Fanling North new development area. So it is very hard not to support this item because we are looking at the remaining phase. For those business undertakings in the area, it seems that you are adopting a multi-pronged approach to do your best to relocate the business undertakings. In paragraph 35, we see that there are 5 ways listed out in how you would provide assistance to those who wish to relocate their business. It seems that the best method so far is under F, to develop multi-story buildings. But that's not enough to cater to the needs. Or you would only receive the return tender price for Yuen Long end of June. Other projects are equally important. I'm happy to see that you have made changes to the planning guidelines. And under D, it seems that 20 sites have been let under the current arrangement to help affected operators. In the short term, 20 sites have already been let out. Are there other potential sites that have been identified? E, also equally important, on a multidisciplinary team to coordinate different departments. How many people go under this team? Do the terms of reference of this team really be able to help those operators in need? I support A, B, C, D, F. I just want to know about the progress on what I mentioned earlier in paragraphs E and F. P.S. Thank you. We will continue to identify sites to arrange for short-term lease. Only those brownfield operators who are affected by land resumption would be eligible. Well, for these two development sites, we work on site formation and build new roads. As I said earlier, if we do not require the site or the piece of land immediately, we can lease it out on a short-term basis to allow affected brownfield operators to continue their operations. As for the multidisciplinary team stated under E, we are talking about 10 colleagues in this team from different departments, such as those from the planning department to help them with planning applications. There are also colleagues from the Buildings Authority and also the Lands Department. Even though we're only talking about a small sites or temporary sites, they still need to submit their plans. And this team, since it's multidisciplinary, can really help brownfield operators to provide them with a one-stop service, because the operators don't know where to start with their applications, and this team can provide assistance. And we have assisted more than 30 operators affected so far. There still are tens of operators we are providing assistance with, but we have not put this down on paper. This team receives many inquiries every day on when they will need to leave the site, or when is the last day for relocation. So this team can really help them in their progress. There are still 4 members who wish to speak. I don't think we'll be able to complete this item today because there are only 15 minutes left. Dr. Junius Ho may need to ask his question at the next meeting. Mr. Gary Zhang. Thank you, Chairman. Well, this item is really very important to our future development. I did mention in our meeting for the development of Northern Metropolis that we should be well planned in advance to request infrastructure site formation, to use a CIM, and to go for digital development. Would there be a readiness for automated driving as well? We should actually include this in our planning guidelines and not to just add this on later, as this would be much more efficient and the cost much lower and more cost efficient. Many members have asked about the traffic issue. People would be highly reliable on Tung Station. This would be a newly added station for the East Rail. In future, there may be job opportunities in Sentin, and that we would have to rely on the Northern Link main line. We gazetted this last year, but we still do not know when this project could be approved to begin construction. What is the timetable for the Northern Link main line? Has there been delay already? I am a bit concerned about that and would like to hear from the administration on that. P.S. Well, 2 questions from Mr. Zhang. Let me see if Mr. Chung can address your first question. Be rest assured that in terms of infrastructure, we, when working on items related to being a smart city, have already added in what is needed, such as smart roads, smart lampposts, etc. You are correct. The Northern Link main line will be highly important as it's the connection to Tung North. The TD is now in discussion with the MTRC, and we are planning for completion by 2034. Mr. Chung, a new town development would, of course, be working towards a smart city. Let me give you some examples. There would be traffic sensors to monitor real-time speed, traffic volume, etc. There would also be a traffic display to display real-time information and estimated time so that drivers will be able to take their most suitable routes.
We also will provide checks as early as possible to detect leakage of pipes. We will also have smart lampposts that will collect meteorological data and to support the development of 5G infrastructure. Thank you. Mr. Michael Tian. Thank you, Chair. I want to ask the Permanent Secretary. I've shown this placard last time. The pink zones were supposed to be used for INT development. And it was said earlier because there are other development areas that would offer land for INT development. The land shown here would be better used for other purposes. you are saying that many of such spaces will be used for residential developments, but these are actually significant spaces. They occupy a large area. You have other facilities that you can provide, educational facilities or cultural and recreational facilities. Basically, these facilities will be scattered in the residential developments according to the administration. For example, schools, you would have to earmark the lots first, but then if there is no longer such demand, you can make changes. So you're saying most of the developments in the areas will be residential in nature, but then it seems not be the case because these zones would occupy a significant area. And I assume most of these will not only be residential developments. I also want to ask, so with the resumption of the Fanling golf course, 10,000 odd housing units will be provided. It is in the vicinity of a train station. Some members of the public actually asked me, they are on the public housing wait list and they would prefer being able to be allocated a unit in Tung North because it is convenient. For other areas, it may not be as convenient. There will only be a hospital in the vicinity. There are no other facilities. So, of course, people have different views. Some would want offices, some would want F&B facilities. Of course, you may want to have shopping malls and whatnot. For example, Hongshui Q, they have 10 million square feet of commercial space. So I am asking you not to have similar facilities here because they would prefer going to other places. So why not just have these facilities be residential developments instead? Everyone would prefer living here because if you have them move near the Fanling golf course, people actually don't like it and you have to do more work in revamping the golf course or converting the golf course to residential development. So why not move all the people here? Thank you. Permanent Secretary. As said earlier, our original plans were to have these areas for INT development. These areas are quite close to the Castle Peak Road, so we would need to make reference to the local conditions when determining the land uses. We have plans to move government offices to the areas and thereby releasing land in urban areas. This is something that we have been looking into. The member asked if we would consider having more residential developments in the areas. I would say this, we are already going to provide 86,000 odd housing units and 70% of them, 50 odd thousand of them would be public housing already. So even if we are to have more residential developments, they will not be public. And I want to say this, we should not link what is happening here to what we are doing at the Fanling golf course, because if such discussions are to arise every time we conduct development in new territories, I will find this to be quite disturbing. So I would ask the member not to link the two issues. Thank you. Dr. Junius Ho, I am just asking for a written response by the administration. The first stage commenced in 2019. It will only be completed in 2031. That is including the remaining phase works. According to the paper on page 10, we have the costs for individual key items. Page 12 in the English version. So I want to ask, how much will actually be used for the engineering infrastructure? And I want to ask for the covers. It is said that in 2031 to 2034, the 80,000 odd units will be completed. So by my own crude calculations, if you are to spend $30 odd billion on this and to be divided by the number of units to be provided, it would cost 300 to 400,000 per unit. So for each public housing unit, in general, the area would be 350 square feet. It would also take 15 to 60 years to complete the projects. So this would be a significant cost. I think you should make sure the public is aware that the construction cost is about $4,000 per square foot. I do appreciate the administration trying to save costs wherever you can and to strive for the best work. But then if we are only looking at the paper, we may not get a full picture. So can the administration give a written response on how much will be spent on the 80,000 odd units and how long it will take to complete the construction of such units? And you should provide comparisons on this. So we need to make sure we should save costs and time. Chair, this is my request. I only require a written response. I also want to ask Mrs. Regina Ip to speak for the second round so that we can complete discussions for this project. Thank you, Chair. I am concerned about the operators. So I want to ask about the boundary control point. I believe close to a boundary control point, some of the frozen food suppliers would want to have their operations there. Would you make such spaces available for them? Permanent Secretary. I believe Mrs. Regina, it was referring to the facilities in Mankamto boundary control point. It is not in the scope of this project. It is under the scope of the New Territories North project. Thank you. I also want to ask, you will develop multi-story buildings for operators, and it was said that the tender prices will be returned in June. Are you worried that the auction would not be successful? Thank you. Before we invited tenders, we have first conducted a market survey. So that for those working in logistics, transportation can express their feedback. So we have incorporated their feedback when setting the development parameters. We very much hope that the tender exercise will be successful because we have already incorporated market feedback. But of course, it would have to wait. Once we have the prices, we'll see if there is any room for improvement for tender arrangements. I have no other comments to make. I would like to speak in support of the projects. Thank you. I think 2 other members would like to speak for the second round, and I think as we are very close to the start of the council meeting, if members agree, I will extend the meeting for not more than 5 minutes to complete discussion on this item. I'm not sure if Dr. Jonas Ho and Mr. Michael Tian will agree. Will you be brief? Actually, I've already asked that, but you have pressed the request to speak button again. I did not press that. Excuse me, Mr. Michael Tian. I'll need only 1 minute.
I just want to tell the PS that there are 2 options for the public housing. Well, to build it in Fanling, you'll have to give up the golf course, and there is no other space to relocate this golf course. To give up this, if you give this up in this area, then you're only relocating government offices by relocating them to new territories. Well, you have many options of actually moving to every station in new territories. Everybody wants to live above the MTR station more than living next to a golf course. Users do not want to live next to a golf course. They are not interested in golf course. They are willing to do that, but you tell us that you should not actually link these 2 together. I know that it's very important for you to identify office space, but the golf course cannot be replaced, and many of the public actually are in support of my view, because users are actually in support of living near MTR stations as well. Thank you. All right, Mr. Tian's comment has already been heard. Well, so we take note of this view. If there are no other questions, I would like to put this item to vote. For those of you in favor of PWSC bracket 2024 to 25 6, please raise your hands. For those who object, please raise your hands. No. All right. I believe that the majority of members support this item. So this item is passed. On whether there is a need to further discuss this paper, in accordance with the procedures for the PWSC 41A, I now move to ask members if members are in favor of the Finance Committee further discussing this item. I remind members that if this is passed, that means that members suggest that the FC further discusses this item. If members are not in favor, that means that members do not recommend the FC to further discuss this item. For those in favor, please raise your hands. 3. For those who object, please raise your hands. I believe that the majority objects to this item not being further discussed, PWSC 2024-25-6. Well, this item has been completed. We thank the administration for coming in. We will discuss the second item at the next meeting, which is on June 19th from 8:30 to 10:30. Please attend punctually. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.